So if you've been monitoring the industry, you've probably noticed that many of the watches that are being released are reinterpreted designs from brands' archives. And this is not done by accident, because brands know very well that we as enthusiasts usually like these and we typically buy them. But of all the brands that do this, I think Longines does this exceptionally well. And with a brand with such an expansive archive, there really is no shortage of material here. But of all the watches that make up these different releases that they've brought out over the past few years, today we're looking at one that I think might be the best of the best. So immediately when I saw the release of this watch, or the announcement of this watch back in late 2019 of this Heritage Classic sector, I was immediately enamored and I wanted to feature it on the channel. I think it checked off a lot of the boxes. Very wearable case, had a nice movement, decent price, and relatively attainable, not cheap, but relatively attainable, and it had an amazing dial. So very excited to be covering this watch here today. So this model in general is paying tribute to a 1934 reference from Longines' catalog, and does get a little bit larger of a case format here, but is getting so much of the same essence of what was encapsulated within that piece from many decades ago. So let's first look at a basic rundown of the specs of this piece. First, looking at this watch, we have a case size of 38.5 millimeters, thickness of 11 millimeters, lug width of 19 millimeters, lug to lug of 47.3 millimeters, water resistance of 30 meters. Movement inside, we have an automatic L893, and for the crystal here, we have sapphire. First, when examining this watch on the wrist, we have a piece that I think is going to be right in the sweet zone for the majority of wrists out there. With its 38.5 millimeter case size, relatively thin case of 11 millimeters, and lug to lug that has a presence but won't overhang on even the smallest of wrists out there, probably myself included in that, especially given these heavily sloped off lugs that shoot directly down. And I really find this 38 to 39 millimeter case size as a great middle ground. It's not gonna scare away many people that have tendencies to lean towards the larger end or even the smaller end with their case sizes of preference. And for the lug width here, we have 19 millimeters. And again, odd numbers, never my favorite here, but there's a lot of third-party options. I have some available on my site, but also the strap in general is a little bit kind of a spongy texture to it on the outer lining. But other than this point, I don't think you can complain at all about the wearing experience on this case when it's on the wrist. The case comes with a brushed finish, a sizable 6.5 millimeter crown that lays reasonably flat to the case side and is very easy in its operation. And the watch also features a nice sapphire crystal that plays with the details of the dial. And given its slight dome, it is much better in mirroring the vintage look that comes with old style crystals from decades ago in comparison to your run-of-the-mill flat sapphire. Now, the idea of a sector dial is not anything new. Many brands had their own take on this dial design back in the 1930s and 40s with brands like Longines, Omega, and in recent years we've seen another jump start to the fascinations of dials of this sort with the release of models from several brands, but perhaps the most relevant in this case being the master control date sector from Jaeger-LeCoultre. And despite loving that watch, I think this Longines went a better direction with the dial layout. But before injecting any more opinion here, let's take a little bit closer look at the dial and its parts. So when examining this dial, the use of space and lines needs to be the first area of interest. In typical sector dial fashion, we have two primary concentric circles on the outside of the dial that surround the central dial point and house the minute and hour markings within. In comparison to other sectors on the market, this gap between these circles is rather restrained, but does look fantastic with its metallic finish. The space tucks the glossy black numerals and markings to the outskirts to provide the silver central dial right at the center of stage. And at the 12, we have the writing of Longines. At the center, the dial has two heat blue pencil style hands. And at the 6, we have the lovely sub-seconds that partially covers the 6 o'clock numeral. And I know watch enthusiasts enough to know that this is usually an area of contention, cutting off numerals. And I want to link off to a really interesting video in one of my favorite YouTube channels about watches, the ID Guy. He kind of speaks to more of an industrial designer perspective on watches, and he did a write-up of this piece and actually looked at what would be the other alternatives if they did not try to cut off the 6 here. And I think it's really interesting to kind of see what would be those other options, and he has a take on it. So I'll link to that down below because I think it could create some good conversation, and I do really like his channel. However, overall, we have a dial that certainly has roots of decades prior, but with its use of silver, gray, and blue colors, manages to feel pretty modern in comparison to, say, the typical brown and golden tones that seem to find their way in all of these vintage style reissues. Yet I wanted to go back to why I think this dial is very well done and why I think this might be my favorite layout of any modern sector out there on the market at the moment. First, the spacing is superb. The space at the outskirts of the dial with the actual sector dial circles really helps let the dial breathe and makes the condensed minute and hour track of the sector feel right. As sometimes with these reissues, you get a design that feels like a puzzle where one assembling doesn't really know what the end picture is gonna look like, and then leads to things kind of going out of place when trying to keep in mind the modern status quo of watch design. But perhaps the most important point why I love this take on the sector is the symmetry. The dial is just simple and perfectly balanced. The absence of the dates on this piece, I think, just really assists in elevating its looks, in my opinion, when looking back at the JLC Master Control date. A watch and a brand that I absolutely love, but when you see the balance that's achieved here, I think there really is a needed tip of the cap here. Flipping this watch over, we have a closed engraved case back protecting the automatic L893. Now this Longines caliber is a modified ETA A31501. The movement hidden from view has a couple interesting points worthy of mentioning here. First, the beat rate is an unconventional 25,200 vibrations per hour, which aids in the more classic ticking of the vintage style models of this ilk. In addition, the power reserve of this is stretched to a lengthy 64 hours. It features hacking and hand winding, which is a treat given the larger crown, has a silicone hairspring, and this model is running at around 7 seconds from perfect time a day. So whenever trying to review a watch on this channel, I always try to take the perspective of somebody that, who is this watch for? Because in a lot of cases, the watch really isn't for me. But in this kind of case here, getting this watch and seeing this watch, I was excited immediately when I saw this watch was released, and I wanted to cover it. It checked off a lot of the boxes for me in terms of what I like, and also I think delivers a lot in terms of what the market might like. It has a thoughtful design that plays to the past tastefully, a nice fitting case, a solid movement, and a relatively attainable price, all of which leads to another job well done by Longines in recreating a heritage model that gives us a window to the past. And I have to say, this is one of their best works of this entire heritage catalog, and that's saying a lot for what they've done and released in the past 5 years. So guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this watch down below. What do you think? Are you a fan of it? Are you not a fan of it? I have pretty strong feelings about this. I was trying to contain them as much as possible, but I think this is definitely a winning watch from Longines, probably one of the best watches I've seen them release in the past few years. So big fan of it. Love to see comments down below on what you guys think. Also, if you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Are there other brands and watches that you'd like me to cover in the future? I'd love to see comments like that as well down below. Also, guys, go to my new website. I have a lot of things that are new there. One is written content that I'm releasing every single week. That's totally different than the content that I'm releasing on the YouTube channel. So definitely sign up, fill out the form on the homepage. I also released 300 new products for watch straps, leathers, NATOs, rubber straps, exotic reptilian straps. Definitely go check it out. I'm really proud of the offering that I have there. And in addition, I also am now an authorized dealer of about 16 brands. So go check out the new offering. If you guys are in the market, any of those purchases also just support the content and allowing us to keep doing what we're doing here. And if you want to stay up to date with the content as well, be sure to follow me on Instagram. Also taking some cool photos of watches, so follow me there. So guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.